weeks when we first learned of the caravan heading this way, and even reports of other ones.
Immigration detention. You just said illegal immigrants were given a court date and then they're released into the U.S. until that date. But we hear that the problem is a lot of them don't return for that court date. Is that true?
Yes, and that's what the president has, we heard him repeatedly pointing that out ahead of the midterms on the campaign trail. And it's at least, my estimates, it depends what group you look at, what research organization, but roughly 20% at least of asylum seekers don't show up for the court date. When you look at overall migrants as a whole, that number increases. And so, you know, we're also looking at something, it's the asylum seekers, obviously, with the caravan have been a focus right now, but in the past, there's been a lot of attention given to family units and child separation, which was something that was a really big topic earlier this year. And, you know, that's based on the Flores settlement, which dates all the way back to the Clinton era in the 90s, where basically unaccompanied minors were not allowed to be detained more than 20 days, when the Ninth Circuit then expanded that to all children. So that's kind of what this administration has been dealing with.
But it's also something that the Obama administration had to deal with, specifically the Flores Agreement.
Yes, that's true, and it's as I said, it's been something that's dated back to 1997, and it's also been a problem in the Bush administration. And you know, looking at when you talk about the new incoming Congress coming in January, whether or not they're going to be able to take a look at this and fix that problem, the question looks at history, and if it's been in place for more than 2 decades, the question bears if that's really a likelihood that there will be any changes made.
So the president has said that he would fight this case all the way to the Supreme Court. What can be done to stop this loophole, specifically catch and release, and images like we saw at this specific site on the border? This happened back in 2013 during the Obama administration as well.
Right. You know, I think the president's going to have to make a strong case that there's some sort of a national security emergency in this. That definitely gives the executive more authority to be able to make changes to immigration law, at least even in the short term. We saw that with the travel ban, for example. And, you know, in terms of what we were talking about with the Flores Agreement.
That's the Aeroshell.
The Aeroshell will begin taking atmospheric readings immediately after it's released, sending data back to 2 mini spacecraft trailing behind. There'll be a few moments of free fall before the rockets kick in, steadying the Aeroshell's landing. And that's when scientists are crossing their fingers that major dust storms don't become an obstacle. If all goes off without a hitch, InSight will begin a 2-year study of Mars's deep interior in an effort to help us understand how all rocky planets were formed.
Mars is really an intriguing destination for that purpose as well, trying to really understand what those conditions were like back 4 billion years ago. Did life actually begin on Mars in that time frame? And if it did, is there any preservation of that left on the surface?
When InSight lands around 3 o'clock Eastern on Monday, viewers will be gathering in watch parties across the country, but you can also watch it from the comfort of your home. NASA is broadcasting the whole thing online. In New York, Jackie Heinrich, Fox News.
Pretty cool. Well, the time now is about half past the top of the hour, almost. Theresa May, in the fight of her political life, the speech that she's giving to Parliament today to try and seal the deal on Brexit. And one Democrat says progressives will lead the party to take on President Trump in 2020. But will that help or hurt their chances of winning back the White House? We debate it. Up next, standing in the way.
We have members of the Republican conference who don't want a border wall or border security. That's problem one. I think we can do it in the lame duck. I'm urging my leadership to bring it to my bill, or even if it's Kevin McCarthy's bill. I don't really care whose bill, as long as it's a straight border wall bill this next week or two. We can do that. We can get that done, and we can get it over and get it to the Senate. So that's problem one. The other problem is that the Senate doesn't have the horses to get it across either. So there's 2 big hurdles. There was a caravan in April, and I feel like we've been woefully prepared for this one. So we have to face the fact that some of our leaders have let us down, and Congress has let us down. And I feel bad about that, but that's where we need to go.
Well, Big's border bill would fine Mexico and other countries $2,000 for every person who is arrested after entering the U.S. illegally. Well, British Prime Minister Theresa May must convince Parliament to pass her Brexit deal ahead of a crucial vote next month. It took less than an hour for European leaders to sign off on it this weekend. Ellison Barber explains why this next step would be the biggest hurdle yet.
Prime Minister Theresa May is urging the British Parliament to sign off on the Brexit agreement reached by the European Union and the United Kingdom. Both May and the European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker say this is the only possible deal.
If people think somehow there's another negotiation to be done, that's not the case.
The European Union will not change its fundamental position when it comes to this issue.
The deal lays out the terms of the UK's European Union departure. It also takes into account the framework for the UK-EU relationship moving forward and what's described as the common objective of a close future relationship. But this deal is not final. Next, the British Parliament and the European Parliament will vote on the deal. May says the British Parliament will vote sometime before Christmas after a, quote, crucial national debate. But the future of this deal in the UK is still so far from certain. It faces opposition from those who do not support leaving the EU and those who do.
This draft agreement fails her own key commitments. The Prime Minister has not been able to guarantee an outcome that eliminates the risk of the introduction of the so-called backstop arrangements.
This deal risks further.
Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under President Obama, Joel Rubin, thank you both for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks,
Great to be with you.
So, Madison, I'll start with you. Is this a good direction for Democrats to go?
You know, Heather, for the past 2 years, we've been criticizing Democrats for lacking a message, and I think this seems to be their response, going farther left than they had gone in the past. And while obviously this may win somebody a primary in 2020, it's not going to win a general election. And I think it all goes back to the economy, which, as you know, has been President Trump's strongest accomplishment. That has, in fact, been lauded by both sides of the aisle. Jobs, deregulation, tax cuts, these are the things that people are happy about and have seen effects in their own lives. And I don't think that these progressive policies are going to produce these same effects.
And Joel, the number of candidates, already a large field has been attracted saying that they're considering running for 2020. We can bring up a list of some of those names as you discuss it, 37 in all so far. Some very familiar names. You got Senator Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, former Vice President Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. What do you think about this trend?
Well, Heather, I've run for office, and I have to say that the Democratic base is very strong, and it clearly had an impact in this last election cycle. But it's not necessarily Democrats having a progressive versus moderate fight. A progressive agenda is what won the House for Democrats this past November, and it was a convincing victory by nearly 10 million votes. So I think we're going to see that agenda permeate across whichever candidate gets nominated. The question is which candidate is going to be able to not only communicate that, but also engage the purple state voters with that agenda and demonstrating how far right President Trump's agenda has been and how it hasn't really helped them in their daily lives.
So, Madison, back to you. If you take a look at the issues themselves, what issue can Republicans concentrate on going ahead towards 2020 that would counteract some of these progressive candidates?
Sure, let's look to jobs. A lot of Democrats have been coming forward saying, oh, well, President Trump really hasn't been able to produce more jobs than President Obama. They both averaged around 200,000 jobs a month. But we have to look at the composition of those jobs. This is where that effect is coming in on people's everyday lives. We've seen a huge uptick in goods-producing jobs, and on top of that, we've seen a shift from leisure and retail into jobs more like transportation and warehousing. Keep in mind, leisure and retail averaging around $500 weekly pay, whereas warehousing averaging double that at almost $1,000. Construction jobs also up. Obama's last 2 years, he only produced 2,000 new construction jobs. President Trump produced 47,000 already, and construction jobs bring in the highest, or second highest, actually, weekly pay around $1,500. This is what people are happy about, especially here in my home state of Ohio and across the Midwest.
Yeah, and Joel, just taking a look at the very preliminary numbers of people who headed out to shop over the Thanksgiving holiday, saying that, you know, lower income families for the first time had money in their pockets to spend.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that there have been upticks in the economy, but we're also looking at a $1 trillion deficit. And voters in this past cycle were very concerned about their health care. For example, pre-existing conditions needing to be covered, and the president's party trying to take that away. So there's a lot of economic security issues that are underlying the general economy. And I think Democrats exploited that, quite frankly, in this last election, and are going to push an agenda in the House in particular that tries to highlight those differences heading into 2020.
And there would be some argument as to whether or not they exploited that truthfully, because you hear some Republicans say, you know, they're not trying to take away those previous conditions. Madison?
Yeah, I mean, the president and so many Republicans have come forward saying, hey, we don't support Obamacare because of the economic detriment that it has provided to many people. However, we do support protecting pre-existing conditions. We want our healthcare system to be better. We don't want it to be broken just because people want, for the sake of saving Obamacare. We want it, everybody, Democrats and Republicans, to come together on healthcare. On top of that, I mean, there's so many other issues here that I feel when we look back to the midterms, Democrats could have done so much better on, and they did not. I mean, on average, they produce less wins than the president's party would lose in other elections.
It was an historic victory.
Well, it is.
Here's
what's crazy.
I mean, on average, 2.5 Senate seats are lost.
40 seats flipped in the House.
2.5 Senate seats are lost on average in the first midterm after president's win.
A nearly 10% victory margin is not a small victory margin.
It's taken us all by surprise. It's been very, very painful.
Hundreds of officers lining up as his body was moved from the hospital. An honor guard will watch over him around the clock until his funeral. Officer Romrell is survived by his wife and a 4-month-old baby. A GoFundMe page has raised more than $20,000 to help his family, and we have the link on our website if you would like to donate. An American soldier killed in combat, just identified as Sergeant Leandro Jasso, the Army Ranger, lost his life in a shootout with al-Qaeda terrorists in Afghanistan on Saturday. The Washington State native was on his 3rd deployment since enlisting in 2012. Officials describe Jasso as a humble professional who will be deeply missed. He's the 2nd American troop killed in Afghanistan just this month. And our hearts and prayers with those families. Well, let's switch gears back at home. It is one of the biggest shopping days of the year, and you don't even have to leave your couch. Tracy Carrasco from our sister network, Fox Business, here with more on what is expected to be a historic Cyber Monday. Good morning, Tracy.
Yes, good morning, Heather. It's set to be the single biggest online shopping day ever. Americans are expected to spend a record $7.7 billion on Cyber Monday. That number is up over $1 billion from a record set just last year. Retailers have already scored major profits this weekend, with overall Black Friday sales projected to total $23 billion alone. That's up about 9% from 2017. A large chunk of that was generated on the internet, with shoppers spending over $6 billion on Friday. Over a third of those sales made on cell phones. Retailers saw less foot traffic in stores over the weekend, which experts say could result in better sales today.
Stores that have an online store as well, if they don't have a great Black Friday, they're more nimble online, so they may do something extra special on Cyber Monday that you didn't get in store on Black Friday.
Okay, some of the best deals to look out for today. Amazon is slashing $300 off the price of a Google Chromebook. Walmart is taking $100 off the price of an iPhone 8. Target is offering 15% off thousands of items, and Lowe's and Home Depot are each taking up to 40% off home appliances. Shoppers, though, can expect to spend a little bit more than usual at the checkout. That's because of a recent Supreme Court ruling requiring more companies to collect sales tax on online purchases.
Oh, I almost
Heather?
forgot about that.
Yes.
All right. Well, so the deals need to be even deeper.
Yes, they do.
Thank you so much, Tracy.
Thanks, Heather.
Well, the time now is about 15 minutes until the top of the hour, and a critical runoff election. President Trump heading to Mississippi tonight.
Exactly right. I mean, we just had Thanksgiving. We had these big elections, a month ago. And I think we see that everyone is concerned with this very partisan
And the reason
cycle.
we're here is because neither of these candidates reached 50% in the midterms.
That's right. Under Mississippi law, a lot of people can run, and you have to get at least 50% of the votes cast, and no one got that. So you have this runoff of the top two contenders, and that's what this is all about. But so many people don't even realize there's an election going on tomorrow. So I think the president is going to Mississippi, of course, to say, hey, remember what happened just recently with Brett Kavanaugh? Remember how hard it was to get the votes to get him confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court? Well, if you're a Republican in Mississippi, remember what just happened here and vote accordingly on Tuesday.
And President Trump, this is an area where you coming in, stepping in, and holding these two rallies, that could benefit Hyde-Smith because he won Mississippi in 2016, 57.86% to 40% compared with Hillary Clinton.
That's right. The president is taking nothing for granted, and that's why he's showing up not just one stop, but two stops to remind people to actually show up and vote tomorrow. And I think that's a very big part. It's about getting the base out. Certainly, as your polls have all indicated, and we know the results from the last presidential election, Donald Trump is very popular in Mississippi. So it's just about making sure that the people that voted for Donald Trump the last go around come back and vote again tomorrow. And again, it's a very busy week. We have Cyber Monday today. We just got off Thanksgiving. People are looking toward the holidays. So
Not
it's
really
very easy to get
thinking about an
distracted
election,
and not show up and vote. And the president showing up in Mississippi, I think, is really trying to overcome those other news cycles going on in that state.
If you take a look at, we have at least one poll, and it asked who would you support in a runoff election. 50% say Hyde-Smith, 36% say Espy. This specific poll is an NBC News poll. It's among likely voters.
Yeah, I think, look, if you were a betting person, you would certainly bet that Hyde-Smith will win tomorrow. But again, with the amount of money that flows in from other states to Mississippi and these other states to Texas in the midterms and whatnot, I think that that's causing a lot of sort of underdog candidates to have a shot at actually winning. And I think that's why, again, the president, taking nothing for granted, is showing up to combat that out-of-state flow of funds in favor of Mike Espy, who, of course, was a Bill Clinton official back in the day.
So circling back to the beginning of our conversation, you say this really boils down to which candidate supports the president, and if you support the president, that's the candidate you vote for.
Well, I think it's really quite simple. I mean, the reason why we do not have a wall right now on the southern border is not because of Donald Trump. It's because the people in Congress, we don't have enough votes in Congress to pass a budget to get the wall, right? So you want to have the votes on Capitol Hill for the Trump agenda. And in Mississippi, this is a question of whether or not there will be one additional vote for the Trump agenda or one additional vote against the Trump agenda.
4 states in the run-up to the midterms. A new state law will allow him to run for president and Senate at the same time, by the way. And another possible 2020 candidate, but this one on the Republican field. He challenged President Trump for the Republican nomination back in 2016, and now outgoing Ohio Governor John Kasich is considering doing it all over again.
Worried about our country. So the question for me is, what do I do about this? Do I run because I've determined that I can win? Or is it important for me to make such a good showing that I can send a message that can disrupt the political system in this country? This is a serious thought and consideration every day.
Well, the 66-year-old says all options are on the table, indicating that he could consider a third party or even a bipartisan run. What do you think he's going to do? Well, now it's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly. Up first, the good. A mother thanking this Good Samaritan for saving her choking baby at a Golden Corral in North Carolina. Deborah Rouse rushing from her table to perform the Heimlich maneuver.
Border crossings in America. The hundreds of migrants making a run for it, demanding to be let in. The brand new threat from President Trump to try and stop some of the chaos at the border. Also in the hot seat, ousted FBI Director James Comey grilled on the Hill next week. But will this turn into a political carnival?
That's the prediction from a top Republican. What Trey Gowdy says needs to happen to plug the leaks before they even happen. And Democrats just days away from deciding the next Speaker of the House.
And why all signs now point to Nancy Pelosi despite rumors of a rebellion. Fox and Friends First continues right now. Kind of funny playing this song while you look at a shot of Midtown.
I feel like it's like calming, like we're easing into the work week.
That's right.
I kind of like it.
It's a soothing song. John Mellencamp this morning. Good morning. You're watching Fox and Friends First on this Monday morning. I'm Rob Schmidt.
And I'm Jillian Mealy. Thank you so much for starting your day with us. We begin with a Fox News alert. Our nation's busiest port of entry reopens after hundreds of migrants stormed the U.S.-Mexico border.
Border Patrol agents forced to fire tear gas into some uncontrollable crowds. Griff Jenkins is live in Washington with the Trump administration's response to what happened on Sunday. Hey, Griff.
Good morning, Rob and Jillian. Yeah, hundreds of the more than 5,000 migrants camped across the border rushed the port of entry near San Diego, giving the Trump administration its first real test of its policy towards the caravan. It began peaceful, but devolved into chaos when migrants became violent, causing Border Patrol officials to fire tear gas into Tijuana as Mexican officials arrested dozens for aggressively charging that border. Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen issuing this statement: DHS will not tolerate this type of lawlessness and will not hesitate to shut down ports of entry for security and public safety reasons. We will also seek to prosecute to the fullest extent of the law anyone who destroys federal property, endangers our frontline operators, or violates our nation's sovereignty. Officials had to temporarily close that port of entry, and Mexican officials are now vowing to deport those arrested. As Deputy Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection Robert Perez told Fox News that this caravan is unlike any he's ever seen.
This caravan and this phenomenon and how it's manifested itself is absolutely unique to anything that we had seen in the past. And the violence that has been perpetuated across two international borders and throughout the country of Mexico is something that we have taken particular note of and that we are absolutely prepared to deal with if it were to occur.
And it's prompting lawmakers headed back to Washington today to put a priority on this.
We have to get on top of this. It is a national security interest and a top priority of the president and the Congress.
Yesterday, guys, there were reports of cooperation between the administration and the incoming New Mexican president over holding migrants in Mexico as asylum applications play out rather than releasing them in the U.S. But there is nothing firm on that. Look for that perhaps later today or later this week.
All right. We'll be certainly looking for that. Griff, live in Washington. Thank you.
All right, many criticized President Trump for his handling of the border.
But as Chris Buscrick, editor of American Greatness, points out, globalists are more concerned with securing foreign borders than they are our own.
Donald Trump was right when he said two years ago that he was building a movement. And he was right building a movement, right? There's two parts to that. There were not enough people there who were already bought into the Trump agenda on day one back in January of 16 or before that to staff all the positions. And so what did he do? He had to grab people from, old Bush people, old Romney people. These are people who do not support the president's agenda. They think that it is their job to stop the president. Why? That's left to their own thoughts. But Donald Trump is the one person who was elected by the American people on a very clear platform of putting Americans first, whether it be on trade or on immigration. Those two issues, of course, are related, or on these foreign wars. He's the person who put that out there, and people flock to him as a result of that. It's amazing to me when you talk about immigration and foreign wars, you see these exact same people, you see these globalists who are willing to, in fact, eager to use American troops to defend the borders of Somalia or Iraq, but not the American border, not our own American border and American interests.
Democrats and the GOP also debating whether Congress's new line of questioning with former FBI Director James Comey about a potential anti-Trump bias into the Hillary Clinton email and Russian investigation should be public. Democrats say the interview should be open session. Congressman Trey Gowdy says the interview should be videotaped and released because recent public congressional hearings have been, quote, circuses. So TikTok, the timeline and deadline is coming, guys, and we are inching closer towards another government shutdown.
Okay, Matt, thank you.
Another Democrat who originally opposed Nancy Pelosi as House Speaker now showing signs of support. Massachusetts Congressman Stephen Lynch telling a local TV station he will vote for Pelosi if it means not supporting a Republican. Last week, New York Democrat Brian Higgins reversed his
or try to, at least, to prevent the rushing of these migrants. But this has become a tactic. This, we've seen it in Eastern Europe where migrants stormed fences. We've seen it in Gaza, and now we're seeing it on our own borders. And it's got to be addressed in some form or fashion. We've got to have politicians here in our country that have the resolve, that have the backbone to defend American citizens, to defend our sovereignty first and foremost.
It is interesting to see how it changes when all of a sudden Mexico is on the hook for something here, and they've got a stake in this game. This has now kind of become their problem because of the way the administration is handling it. What do you think about their response?
Well, I think that their response is still very, very tepid, to be honest with you. I mean, their Constitution calls for open borders. They have lived by the idea of immigration being the problem of the illegal immigration being the problem of the United States. And now all of a sudden, what goes around comes around. It has come back and bitten them. And they are having a very, very difficult time. Mexican politics is full of duplicity. They are very, very two-faced. And here, all of a sudden, they have an illegal immigration problem of their own, and they're trying to save face. They're trying to avoid looking racist. But you can't help it. I mean, you cannot allow foreigners to enter your country, any country. You cannot allow that to happen. You can't have unbridled, unvetted immigration into another country.
You say tepid. I'm wondering what more you would like to see them do immediately, because as we all know, sometimes it takes more than just a night, more than just a weekend to make changes.
Well, I'll be honest with you. What it's going to take is a complete shutdown of the border. I remember when I worked in the Reagan administration, because as soon as the sun would go down, a lot of illegals would run across the border, and there would be this cat and mouse game that was played with the Border Patrol. That cat and mouse game has now turned into a lion that's at our doorstep. And what needs to happen is we need to secure the border as much as we can, even with the military, because I believe very, very strongly this is an invasion. The other thing that we've got to have is we've got to have politicians in Washington that have the resolve that they're going to stand, first of all, to protect the American citizen. And, it's just amazing to me that the Democrats are willing to shut down the country or the government rather, to defend Robert Mueller, but they're not willing to defend or to put the American citizen by putting up a wall. That's
George,
amazing to me.
Yeah, it is something. George, the media narrative on this has been that these are mostly women and children, that they're escaping violence in their own country. The Department of Homeland Security last week said that it's mostly young men. And when you see video like you saw, what does that say to the Democrat side of this and what the media has been pushing as far as a narrative?
Well, again, it's fake news. It is absolute fake news. And again, we see that the media sides with the globalists, if I can use that term. It sides with the Democrats. It is undermining American society, the American.
Hundreds of officers lining up as his body was moved from the hospital. An honor guard will watch over him around the clock until his funeral. Officer Romrell is survived by his wife and 4-month-old baby. A GoFundMe page has raised more than $20,000 to help his family. We have the link on our website if you'd like to donate.
An American soldier killed in combat, just identified as Sergeant Leandro Jasso. The Army Ranger lost his life in a shootout with al-Qaeda terrorists in Afghanistan on Saturday. The Washington State native was on his third deployment since enlisting in 2012. Officials describe Jasso as a humble professional who will be deeply missed. He is the second American troop killed in Afghanistan just this month.
It is every shopper's favorite day, and that's because you don't have to leave your couch.
Anti-social shopping. Tracy Carrasco from our sister network Fox Business here with more on what's expected to be a historic Cyber Monday. Hey, Tracy.
Yes, good morning. It's set to be the single biggest online shopping day ever. Americans are expected to
have an online store as well. If they don't have a great Black Friday, they're more nimble online, so they may do something extra special on Cyber Monday that you didn't get in store on Black Friday.
Okay, take some notes. Some of the biggest deals to look out for. Amazon slashing $300 off the price of a Google Chromebook. Walmart is taking $100 off the price of an iPhone 8. Target is offering 15% off thousands of items. And Lowe's and Home Depot are each taking up to 40% off home appliances. Shoppers can expect to spend a little bit more than usual at the checkout. That's because of a recent Supreme Court ruling requiring more companies to collect sales tax on online purchases. Rob, Jillian?
What a bummer that is.
Yeah.
All right, Tracy, thanks so much. 25 minutes after the hour, Thanksgiving holiday travel has been halted for a lot of people. Thousands of flights canceled. Roads have turned early, closed the port of entry at San Ysidro. That's near San Diego. It has since reopened. At some point last night, it reopened. Mexican officials now vowing to deport any migrants who try to cross into our country illegally, and they're also helping to tighten security there, the Mexicans and the Americans working together. Jillian.
The United States offering $5 million to find those responsible for the 2008 Mumbai terror attacks. Today marks 10 years since gunmen unleashed 4 days of violence across the city, including at the iconic Taj Mahal Palace Hotel. 166 people died, including 6 Americans. Officials in India honored the anniversary by laying wreaths at a memorial site. Flights canceled on Sunday. Hundreds more already grounded today. Meteorologist Janice Dean live in the Weather Center. Nope, that is a lie. She is live a couple feet away from me in the studio.
It is my weather center everywhere I go.
That's right. Good
you know what? What a miserable day for millions of folks across the central U.S. We had blizzard warnings for several states, spanning from the central U.S. up towards Chicago and the Great Lakes. And we have cooler temperatures behind this system that is now going to move into the Northeast. So let's take a look at it. Past 24 hours, still snowing in Chicago, moving out of Kansas City. We're going to see the potential for snow on the backside of this storm along the coast. That's where it's going to be warm enough for just a rain event. But we're also going to see gusty winds. So travel today is going to be difficult, if not impossible, in some of these areas as the storm continues to move eastward. And you can see New York City by 5 p.m., the rush hour, a lot of heavy rain. So just anticipate a rough rush hour home. Thankfully, it won't be snow, but it will be rain with some gusty winds, and it's going to last for a duration of several hours. There's your forecast precipitation. We could see a couple of inches across portions of the Northeast, New Jersey, up towards New England, and then the snow on the backside of this for the Great Lakes. There's your forecast today. So the central U.S., the Midwest areas that were hit hard by the blizzard, a calming period as we head into the next couple of days. That system is going to move across the East Coast today, and then a new system moving into the Northwest for more rain and mountain snow. We'll certainly keep you up to date. But if you are traveling, call ahead. Always a good idea. All right, Rob, back to you.
That storm's got our Carly Shimkus stuck in Chicago.
Oh, my gosh,
Couldn't make it into work today.
Oh, my. We'll just have a little more Thanksgiving turkey.
There you go. Janice, thank you so much.
You got it.
All right, President Trump prepares to come face-to-face with Chinese President Xi Jinping later this week when he travels to Buenos Aires for the G20 summit. And he is confident that his aggressive trade strategy has China ready to make a deal.
China wants to make a deal very badly.
Do you think it's going to happen?
Because of the tariffs. They're going to be paying a tremendous amount of money, which, frankly, is great for our country. We're taking in billions of dollars from China.
All right, so if the so-called trade war is in fact working, will the president's critics give him some credit for that? Here to discuss this is UBS Wealth Management Senior Portfolio Manager Alan Rechtshaven. Got it right this morning.
That's fine.
Alan, good morning to you. Let's take a look at something here real quick. I want to bring up some information on the screen here about this trade war. It's about $250 billion is what the penalty we put on China is. And U.S. consumers of that $250 billion are only going to feel a burden of about 4.5% of that, and 20.5% goes on the Chinese, who are going to feel the impact of that. And you say that that's because the perfect goods have been chosen by the Americans to put tariffs on. Explain that to us.
Yeah, so the government has chosen goods where the producers in China have to bear most of the tariffs. Right now, there was an Econopoll survey that said that 4.5% would be borne by Americans. And so that is an argument that this is a very positive development in this trade war.
So even it's a $250 billion tariff. Tariffs typically hurt both sides. This one is very much more impacting the Chinese because they've picked products that we can buy from other places. These aren't products that the Chinese can just say, oh, you want a tariff? Fine, we're just going to charge you more.
And it has to do with price elasticity also. So the $250 billion worth of goods that have been chosen, the net effect of this is that the trade deficit has gone down. In fact, the Chinese have been hurt 30 to 32%, depending on which goods you're talking about. And the Americans have only been hurt by 15% going out to China. Look, they are in a situation where they sell more stuff to us than we sell to them.
That's the imbalance.
Right. And so that's the argument that President Trump has said, look, this has been unfair, and now we're going to go ahead and fight a trade war until the time where they sit down and be fair with us.
It's a fairly impressive manipulation that the president has pulled off here. You would think that if this had come from a Democratic president, the guys that are big fans of correcting some of these imbalances, like the Bernie Sanders and even Chuck Schumer, would be really touting this and be very proud of this development.
Well, I'd be cautious to call it a manipulation. I think what President Trump's trying to do is he's trying to level the playing field. But the problem with this president, not the problem with the president, but the problem with America today, is it doesn't make a difference how successful the numbers show that the president is. People are willing to discount attributing that to President Trump and attribute it to something else. Look at the unemployment numbers, look at the GDP, and look at the trade now.
And look at China's economy right now, which has definitely taken some hits, and maybe he's in a good position come Buenos Aires later this week in Argentina.
Look, he's speaking from a position of strength. He's always trying to speak from a position of America is great. And that's the position he's going to December 1st in Buenos Aires. He's going to sit down with President Xi, and you know what? If he comes up with a deal, hopefully people can see past their political inclinations and give him credit if he's successful.
Big meetings to watch in Buenos Aires later this week. We will follow that, of course. All right, let's talk about the Federal Reserve and interest rates. They keep spiking up. The president doesn't like that. He says there's no concerns regarding inflation. Why are the rates going up?
You know, my daughter Ronit said something. She's a big animal fan, and this is sort of a plug to get her a dog to my wife. But my daughter Ronit said, when you see a bear, sometimes you just have to play dead. And the Federal Reserve is on an aggressive course. They're moving forward. They're raising interest rates. Interest rates affect the economy. If interest rates can affect the economy, if raising interest rates can hurt the economy, and we're in a period of transition now. Now we have a Democratic House. We didn't have that before. Since right before the election till now, the stock market's down almost 10%. And because of that, now is the time to rein in the horns, to really think about what you're doing. And the Federal Reserve cannot be on a predetermined course to raise interest rates, which ultimately can hurt the economy.
So you think the president is right? The Fed needs to cool it for a while?
I think that's what the market's telling the Fed. Not only the president, but the market is saying, take some time. Don't do anything right now. Don't hurt the economy, because this could actually have political implications for 2020. If the Fed goes ahead and raises interest rate and derails the economy, what does that do to a president who's had so much success with...
Rob and Jillian, good morning to both of you. Hearings are scheduled to take place today in Trenton at the State House. And if lawmakers do reach an agreement, New Jersey would become the 11th state in the U.S. to legalize marijuana for recreational purposes. So here's what will happen today. Lawmakers in the Senate and Assembly committees will be meeting to hammer out all of the details. This is after months of negotiations. This legislation would legalize the possession and personal use of 1 ounce or less of marijuana for people at least 21 years old. It would also provide a way to have previous arrests and convictions for minor marijuana offenses to be expunged from criminal records. Now, if this marijuana legislation is approved by a joint session of the Senate and Assembly budget committees today, the next step would be floor votes in both chambers. That could happen as early as next month, and then Democratic Governor Phil Murphy is expected to sign this into law. There is one particular sticking point, and that is the tax rate. Sales of the drug would be taxed at 12% according to this legislation. However, Murphy has sought a 25% tax rate. And there is some opposition to legalization. There are 40 municipalities, including Union City, where we are right now, that have spoken out publicly and said that they do not want marijuana to be bought or sold within their city limits. Meanwhile, members of the public will get a chance to voice their opposition or speak out about this at the State House in Trenton today. However, recent polls do show that 62% of New Jersey voters are in favor of legalization of marijuana for recreational purposes. So that is the latest live live from here in Union City, New Jersey this morning. Robin, Jillian, I'll send things back to you.
That's 12%.
Yeah, it makes some money.
Incumbent Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith. GOP political analyst Mark Smith joined us last hour to explain why the president's appearances today matter.
The president is taking nothing for granted, and that's why he's showing up. Donald Trump is very popular in Mississippi, so it's just about making sure that the people that voted for Donald Trump the last go-around come back and vote again tomorrow.
Neither Hyde-Smith nor her Democratic opponent, Mike Epps, secured 50% of the votes during the midterms. President Trump has been calling for a border wall since the beginning.
We are building a wall on the southern border. We will build the wall. Build that wall. Build that.
Survivors. The Democratic Socialist tweeting, asking to be considered a refugee and applying for status isn't a crime. It wasn't for Jewish families fleeing Germany. It wasn't for targeted families fleeing Rwanda. It wasn't for communities fleeing war-torn Syria. And it isn't for those fleeing violence in Central America. Of course, hundreds of migrants stormed our southern border over the weekend, and dozens have been placed under arrest. I will consider running for president. That statement from
Done, and will it get done?
Well, I have to say the president has teed up the conversation, and maybe facts and events will help him do that. But obviously, what we're seeing from the border is putting a lot of pressure on Republicans to stand up and fight back. So I think the president's going to come from a very strong position. As you point out, or recently earlier in the show, the president ran on this issue. If you show the images of him, he ran on Build the Wall, and he now does not have an upcoming election that he's got to get pressure from Paul Ryan or Kevin McCarthy to pull back. So I think he's going to go all the way. I think he's going to. He loves the television coverage in terms of making his argument, and it's happening right now on every channel, even ones that don't want to give him a break. So I think the president is in a strong position. Now the question is who in the House is going to lead, because Paul Ryan, I'm told from sources, he's really not involved anymore. So how can Kevin McCarthy or whomever get this done? It's going to be an interesting couple of weeks.
Yeah, Ed, you remind us that the president ran on this, but Roger, I want to go to you. It doesn't mean that Democrats are going to support it. So what do you think Democrats are going to do here?
I think we meet this morning at essentially the first day of a new reality for the Trump administration. What the president has to do is decide how much he's going to double down on appealing to his base. Because his task right now is to pivot from the campaigning that he conducted leading into the midterms and now try to actually legislate. The most interesting thing for me is not necessarily the traditional Republican-Democratic dynamic, because I think we all know that that's going to be contentious. I think it's very possible that the destiny of the president